Good afternoon, and welcome to the GSA Augie webinar series on the Age-Friendly University Initiative. This series was made possible through a grant from the Retirement Research Foundation to the Academy for Gerontology in Higher Education, or Augie for short, for the Founders 3.0 project. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the GSA website. A notice to all attendees will be distributed once the recording is available. Please note that a question and answer session will immediately follow today's live presentation. We'll be accepting questions through the questions feature accessible on the GoToWebinar panel. I'm Carrie Andreoletti, a professor of psychological science and the coordinator of gerontology at Central Connecticut State University. And I'm joined by my colleague, Andrea June, also from Central, who's an associate professor of psychological science and the co-chair of our interdisciplinary gerontology minor. This AFU webinar series was developed by a group of Augie colleagues whose institutions were among the first in the United States to endorse the AFU principles and join the AFU network. Joanne Montepar and Kim Farah presented the first webinar, Becoming an Age-Friendly University Partner, in which they described why higher education needs to be more age-friendly, the vision of the AFU initiative, and how your institution can join the AFU network. That webinar is now available on the GSA website if you missed it and would like to see it or review it. So today, Andrea and I will present the second webinar, One Vision, Many Paths, Making an Age-Friendly University Work for You, in which we'll discuss how different institutions are approaching their age-friendly university vision and offer examples of how your institution can draw on its distinctive strengths to realize the AFU principles. Nina Silverstein and Marilyn Gugliucci will present the final webinar, A Starting Point for Looking at Age Friendliness on My Campus, Augie Can Help, which will discuss some data gathering approaches to explore your institution's age-friendly assets, gaps, and opportunities, along with how Augie can be an AFU resource for you and your institution. And that webinar will be on March 1st. So I'm going to give you an overview of our webinar today. I'm going to begin by providing a brief overview of the AFU initiative and the principles, which offer a vision of the age-friendly university. Next, I'll encourage you to think about the strengths of your own institution. Using our institution, Central Connecticut State University, as an example, I'll discuss how you might leverage your strengths to address some of the AFU principles and think about your path to becoming age-friendly. I'll then turn the webinar over to my colleague Andrea, who will tell you about our AFU journey, as well as provide a brief overview of the journeys of several of our AFU partners. Our hope is that this webinar will help you to find the right path to begin your own AFU journey at your institution. So as discussed in the first webinar, the Age-Friendly University Initiative reflects the work of an international interdisciplinary team convened in 2012 by Professor Brian McCraith, President of Dublin City University. Christine O'Kelly is the DCU Age-Friendly University Global Coordinator, and please see the Aggie AFU Webinar 1 handout for more information. So as you can see in the AFU mission statement on the slide, the AFU initiative provides a vision to inspire institutions of higher education to identify the distinctive contributions they can make in responding to the interests and needs of an aging population in order to promote well-being and quality of life. Since 2012, the AFU initiative has become an international movement, and the network has grown to over 40 institutions in the United States, throughout Europe, Canada, and beyond. In 2016, Augie endorsed the AFU principles, which align with Augie's mission of fostering the commitment of higher education to the field of aging through education, research, and public service. As was discussed in Webinar 1, the AFU framework is built around 6 pillars of activity in higher education. As we'll be asking you to think about your personal and institutional strengths later in this webinar, please take a minute to think about which of these pillars best reflects your strengths or passions. teaching and learning, lifelong learning, research and innovation, intergenerational learning, encore careers and enterprise, or civic engagement. From the pillars, the DCU team articulated the 10 AFU principles, as you can see here. The principles provide the guiding framework that institutions can use to develop their age-friendly mission, programs, policies, and partnerships, as well as identify gaps and opportunities for other age-friendly efforts. As discussed in Webinar 1, each of these principles reflects one of the 6 pillars. And later in our presentation, we'll discuss several of the principles in more detail as we talk about how different AFU partners have realized the principles on their campus. Okay, so assuming the first webinar has already convinced you of the need for institutions of higher education to become more age-friendly, you might be saying to yourself, gee, this sounds like a great idea, but where do I begin? Well, we hope to help you answer this question today. One of the things that we have found most reassuring throughout our process of becoming an AFU partner is that every institution approaches AFU differently, and this is okay. There is no single path to becoming or embodying what it means to be an AFU. Each institution must draw on its strengths and position with its own community in crafting its approach to creating an age-friendly campus. And as outdoor enthusiasts, and in honor of winter, Andrea and I visualize this as many possible options down the mountain. We're all headed in the same direction with the same age-friendly vision, but as on the mountain, our skills, equipment, and the climate will influence the specific paths we take. And I have to thank Andrea for this great analogy and finding this fantastic picture of a mountain. All right, so we believe that the best place to begin is to think about strengths from different perspectives. For example, what are your institutional strengths, your community strengths, and even your individual or personal strengths? What are you already doing well? Here's a list of specific questions that can be helpful to consider. What makes your university distinct or unique? For example, how do you market yourself? What attracts students to your university? What are the areas of excellence on your campus? Another question, how can your location and local aging network be an asset? So is your campus located in an urban setting or a rural setting? And what opportunities for connection and age integration do you have where you are? Who in your aging network would have the interest and the ability to innovate with you? How are you already serving older adult learners or older adults? For example, at your university, are faculty already doing intergenerational programming? Does your continuing education office recruit older adults or adults of all ages? Do they have targeted outreach specific to older adults? Another question, what are the priorities of your administration? In this climate of shrinking budgets, where are the resources being directed? How can you integrate age diversity as a collaborative or integral aspect of that priority? Who are the gatekeepers and change agents on your campus? Think about whose endorsement you would need to move initiatives forward. Which faculty, staff, and administrators already see the value of age integration efforts and are ready to contribute without needing to be convinced? Think about who those might be and find those people. What individual strengths do you bring? So, for example, are you a details person? Are you a big picture person? And how can you leverage that in partnership with others? Do you have a talent for inspiring others to your passions? Have you cultivated relationships across disciplines over your many years on campus? Finally, what are you most passionate about? Do you get excited about the collaborative research opportunities you can create? Or are you more interested in developing age-diverse classroom opportunities? It's important to remember that being an age-friendly campus is more than just having programs with an aging focus. It's also about developing a culture of inclusion, appreciation, and recognition of age diversity that brings together younger and older members of your campus and community in meaningful ways. So when thinking about your strengths, you can also think about how older adults might be included in what you are already doing well on your campus. When we began the process of joining the AFU Global Network, Andrea and I asked ourselves these very same questions. In fact, we continue to come back to these questions as we travel down our AFU path and plan for the future. So in the next slide, I'll discuss what we believe to be our key strengths at CCSU. CCSU is a regional public university with a strong emphasis on teaching. Our classes are generally small and taught by faculty. We're a suburban campus, centrally located only a few miles from our capital city of Hartford. The majority of our students are from Connecticut, and they tend to stay in the state after graduation, which means they have strong ties to our local community. Another strength in our favor, before becoming an AFU partner, was that CCSU was already designated as a Carnegie Community Engagement Institution and also a campus of compassion. And so the missions and visions of these designations dovetailed nicely with the Age-Friendly University Initiative. In addition, we have a long-standing undergraduate gerontology minor and a new graduate certificate in gerontology. Andrea and I have a passion for intergenerational service learning, and we've strengthened our ties to the local aging network over the past several years as we've worked to grow our programs and develop internship and research opportunities for our students. We're also passionate about decreasing ageism, as I'm sure probably everyone listening is, and increasing aging literacy among our students and colleagues. Andrea and I work well together, balancing our individual strengths, and as a team, we try to attend as many events on and off campus as we can to further our aging-related initiatives and strengthen our community ties. We also have a small but dedicated interdisciplinary gerontology committee that meets 3 to 4 times per semester and is supportive of our efforts. So we realize that we're really lucky in this respect, but if you can find even one other person to partner with on your campus, I think that makes a big difference. Another strength was our active involvement in Augie. Getting to know our Augie colleagues through attending and presenting at Augie conferences and serving on Augie committees created opportunities and put us in touch with resources that helped us strengthen our programs and age-friendly efforts at home. It was after my very first Augie conference that I was encouraged to attempt my first intergenerational program and was also motivated to develop a general education gerontology course. And in fact, it was at the Augie conference where we first heard about the Age-Friendly University Initiative and were inspired to take action. So to learn more about what Augie can do for you, be sure to tune into webinar 3. Well, there'll be a lot more discussion about that. Other strengths we had at CCSU were our enthusiastic colleagues in continuing education, who connected us with our local AARP director of community outreach and invited us to collaborate and co-sponsor several age-friendly programs open to the public. In addition, they recently created a lifelong learning program called Scholars for Life, which is now thriving. Lucky for us, they've fully embraced the AFU initiative and are eager partners moving forward. And really, before we heard from continuing ed on our campus, we were just really very separate. So that was a great connection for us to make. Finally, we've experienced administrative turnover at all levels in the past few years. And while this might seem initially like a bad thing, it's really turned out to be a strength for us because our new administration was eager to meet with faculty to learn the lay of the land as they developed their priorities. So this allowed us to get in the door early and talk about the age-friendly university and match our vision with their goals. So this last point might seem a little bit challenging or intimidating. You might be wondering, how on earth do I match the vision of an age-friendly university to a priority like increased enrollment or increasing an endowment for scholarships? But we found that our administrators were really receptive to hearing new ideas to help them achieve their goals. And, related to this question, we encourage you to, again, review the first webinar as Joanne and Kim presented a lot of good arguments for how universities could benefit from being more age inclusive, which you could probably find very useful in talking with your administrators. Maybe encourage your administrators to watch webinar 1. Okay, so next I'll talk about connecting our strengths to the AFU principles. As we considered building upon our strengths in the service of becoming an age-friendly university, we studied the 10 AFU principles and thought about which of them best reflected what we were already doing well at CCSU. While we see opportunity on our campus to address many of the 10 principles, for today's webinar, we'll focus just on 3 that we think are most salient to our strengths and our passions. So principles 4, 7, and 10. As individuals who are passionate about intergenerational learning and who are located at a university with a strong teaching emphasis, principles 4 and 7 match well with our strengths and interests. We've been running a successful intergenerational program, inspired by Augie, again, I have to say, in our classes for the last several years. Our research on the benefits of the program has shown decreases in ageist attitudes for younger adults and increases in feelings of generativity and well-being for older adults. And if you're interested in learning more about our specific intergenerational program, please take a look at the Webinar 2 handout, which has the links and references for 2 related papers that were published in Gerontology and Geriatrics Education. Also, regarding Principle 7, bringing together younger and older adults on an equal playing field, which is something we try to do in our programs, seems to have a much stronger influence on students' understanding of the longevity dividend than anything we can tell them in the classroom. So we've had the pleasure of seeing firsthand the wonderful things that can happen in an intergenerational classroom, and we're eager to develop more opportunities on our campus for intergenerational learning and collaboration. We believe that our messaging about the benefits of intergenerational learning will gain traction among our faculty colleagues whose focus is on improving the classroom experience. We were also drawn to Principle 7, giving our longstanding interdisciplinary minor, where we focus on the opportunities of aging in an aging society as opposed to the problems. And we've seen that more faculty seem to be buying into the value of an aging society, and we feel it's a place to continue to grow our reach. So rather than building more gerontology courses, which is certainly a good thing, but we want instead to hope and encourage our colleagues to infuse more aging content into existing courses across a broader range of disciplines. Our goal is to normalize the topic of aging as valuable to any course of study. So we don't want to hear people saying, oh, that doesn't apply to me or my class. We want to convince them that, yes, it does. And by developing the graduate certificate in gerontology at our university, we hope to increase the appreciation of the longevity dividend to a wider range of students and professionals in our state. Given that Connecticut has the 7th oldest population in the nation, and the majority of our students stay in Connecticut, we see this principle as one of the most important for preparing our students for the 21st century workforce, and for also getting them to think about the importance of well-being across the lifespan, not just for other people, but also for themselves. Finally, Principle 10 is something that we've been focused on in the context of improving and developing our gerontology programs, but also for developing our own understanding of the issues facing older adults in our state. Principle 10 also happens to fit really well with our university's new marketing campaign, Community is Central. We have regular dialogue with organizations such as the North Central Area Agency on Aging, AARP Connecticut, Hartford Healthcare Senior Services, local senior centers, residential care communities, and more. Many people in these organizations have become collaborators and friends and have helped us to further expand and strengthen our connection to the local aging network. We have collaborated with several of our partners on different programs, projects, and presentations geared toward reducing ageism, increasing aging literacy, and strengthening university community ties. If you want to learn more about these, please see our paper in the forthcoming Gerontology and Geriatrics Education special issue on age-friendly universities. And this link now is available also on the Webinar 2 handout. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the webinar over to my colleague, Andrea, who will provide more detail about our path to joining the AFU network, including the specific steps we took to join, where we are now, and where we're going. She's also going to provide a brief overview of the paths of several of our AFU partners, just to give you a better sense of the diverse paths of each institution. So you can see that, yes, everybody really does come at AFU a little bit differently.
So thank you, Carrie. So yes, drawing upon our strengths, we shared the AFU initiative with our small interdisciplinary gerontology committee members, who unanimously supported our desire to join the network and endorse the AFU principles. Next, we sought endorsement from our administration and our faculty senate. Towards this end, emails were sent to the president, the provost, the deans, and our faculty senate president describing the network, outlining the AFU principles, as well as our interest in joining. We highlighted our longstanding interdisciplinary gerontology minor, as well as the new graduate certificate in gerontology, and also highlighted how administrative predecessors had been supportive of our efforts to grow the program by providing budget and other resources, including a recent new faculty line to support the new certificate. We emphasized that as a Carnegie community engagement institution, CCSU already had a strong commitment to community engagement, and that joining the AFU network simply provided a broader and more inclusive framework for thinking about how to better engage with our surrounding community. Again, a natural progression to something our university was already doing well. Finally, we appealed to the fiscal argument by something that grounding our decision to join the AFU movement in the changing demographics of our state and the opportunities to increase enrollment, forge new partnerships, and attract new donors. With the support of the university president and other administrators, Carrie met with the faculty senate. Again, several of the principles were discussed in light of programs and practices that were already in place at the university. And after some questions, just a few short Q&A, the faculty senate also unanimously approved endorsement. As it was mentioned in the first webinar, success has been found in our case and in institutions that we're going to highlight in a few minutes in really the approach of starting at the top but working from the bottom. While it was a relatively easy process for us to get administrative and faculty support, we had engaged in many years of coalition building, both within and outside of the university, that laid the groundwork for this quick endorsement. Our paper in the forthcoming Gerontology and Geriatrics Education special issue on age-friendly universities discusses our process with more depth around coalition building if you're interested in learning more. Our AFU efforts at CCSU are focused on, our current efforts are focused on assessment and on increasing awareness and support. With the backing of the dean and the provost, we invited the campus community to an early discussion planning meeting in November. At a busy time in the semester, approximately 30 faculty and staff across the disciplines and offices on campus attended, which we thought was really positive, especially at that time of the year. And we also got several other emails from people who were interested in being involved, even though they couldn't make that specific meeting time. What this initial meeting allowed us to do was to sort of take the temperature and gather information about what questions people still have, what they're passionate about in terms of the AFU principles, and more importantly, or most importantly, who might be willing to make the long-term commitments required to facilitating this culture change on campus. Carrie and I were granted reassigned time this upcoming semester to do a walking tour across campus to really infuse the AFU vision and do a more comprehensive assessment of CCSU's strengths and weaknesses to really aid in strategic planning. And actually this morning I was at a CCSU strategic planning meeting for the entire campus and brought the AFU principles with me. And it was amazing and really exciting to see how people grabbed onto what the principles were entailing and how this could really fit and we could really build some momentum around this as a broad campus movement. Very exciting. So we also believe that a sustainable AFU committee or advisory board is needed at CCSU to ensure that the AFU efforts are broader than the gerontology program and really become integrated into the campus culture. Based on the information that we've gathered over the next several months, that we hope to create an interdisciplinary and inter-office committee that can identify specific vision and mission with measurable and achievable 5-year goals that further the AFU principles on our campus. In the next set of slides, we're going to highlight other AFU institutions that are addressing principles that are consistent with their strengths and building AFU momentum on campus from those. We, again, hope that this will emphasize that different institutions are addressing different principles in different ways, and there's no one path to creating an age-friendly university. So we're going to start with Florida State University. We thank each of the individuals listed on the slides for sharing this information with all of us, in this case, Dr. Neil Charnas. And for those of you who are attending today's webinar who are considering joining the movement, I'll emphasize that this sharing of ideas and process is common among the network. We really do truly aim to be a partnership where we really are all in this together, trying to create a more age-inclusive society, a campus climate together. So now, although not exclusive on this slide, not exhaustive on this slide, you can see several of the strengths of FSU in crafting its approach to creating an age-friendly campus. An Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, or an OLLI, they also have a strong research institute and an aging-aware community, which strongly support Principle 1, upon which new programs and ideas for age-inclusive education can be fostered. One such new program that Neil shared at the GSA annual scientific meeting this past November was something called InnoVenture Weekend. This is a joint effort of the Institute of Successful Longevity, the College of Engineering, and the School of Entrepreneurship at FSU. Aging was set as the theme to bring the different programs together for the product design and business pitch event. Product statements were written by older adult volunteers who then served as mentors to the student design teams. Doctors Nancy Morrow-Hallow and Brian Carpenter were kind enough to share some information about the strengths of Washington University and St. Louis has brought to becoming an AFU institution and how they will be moving forward. They are calling their approach Washington University for Life, which we love, which they felt was a natural evolution from some of the work that they're already doing on campus around productive aging and engaging older students in their Master's in Social Work program, as well as a popular and supported intergenerational cross-discipline co-taught class exploring what it means to live a longer life, which they call When I'm 64, which really challenges their students to think about aging, both personally and professionally. Again, sort of a new lens at which to think about our old age as change. Again, we're sort of highlighting just a few strengths here, and building around Principle 2, Washington University for Life will be focused on several next move efforts to extend their age-friendly reach in other areas, including encore careers for students, retirement planning for faculty and staff, and programming to plan for ongoing meaning and purpose in life for all. At LaSalle College, having LaSalle Village, which is a retirement community as part of the campus community, normalizes having an age-diverse community and helps to chip away at age segregation. Older adults have access to core educational and other resources such as culture and art. As part of the residential agreement, the residents are required to participate in a certain number of campus activities. This strength helps support several of the AFU principles. One of the innovative ways LaSalle has utilized this asset is to offer small grants for faculty to do 1 to 2 week intergenerational modules within their courses. This invites faculty to get their feet wet, so to speak, and has been a very successful way to infuse opportunities for intergenerational exchange in courses across the curriculum. One such example of intergenerational infusion is Kim Farah's CSI LaSalle Forensics class, And when Kim was presenting some of this work at an honored event at LaSalle recently, the audience of faculty and administrators were really in awe and could really see some of the possibilities of an AFU approach. Dr. Philip Clark at the University of Rhode Island highlighted their visible gerontology program, as well as a successful and collaborative OLLI, and an established research focus as strengths upon which to build their approach to being an age-friendly university. URI has several intergenerational programs involving traditional students and OLLI members, which lines up well with Principle 4. One intergenerational program that's really taking off and that URI is very proud of is called Cyber Seniors, in which URI students work as volunteers to tutor older adults on the use of technology, such things as smartphones, iPads, and laptops. At the University of Akron, Dr. Jennifer Stanley and her colleagues drew upon their strength of offering aging courses since the 1970s. Almost 400 students have received the certificate in gerontology, and UA has a strong doctoral program in adult development and aging. UA provides an Osher Foundation scholarship for adult students and has a standing committee devoted to exploring ways to enhance options for returning to school. UA also has programs specifically designed for retirees by retirees, so the Association of the University of Akron Retirees, which meets once a month and seems like a really innovative and amazing program in which to keep retirees active and engaged at the university. Building upon Principle 8, the Institute for Lifespan Development and Gerontology at UA started the Ohio Senior Olympics. And this year, they are coordinating the Tri-County Senior Olympics with the Department of Sports Science, which is going to be held in April or May of 2018. So again, we thank all of our colleagues for sharing this information with us to help demonstrate how each university approaches AFU differently, again, based in individual strengths of things that are already happening on your campus. If you're interested in hearing more about any of the programs or approaches that were discussed here, we encourage you to reach out to those directly that were cited on the slides. In closing, again, we hope this webinar has helped you to see how your institution can be an AFU. Again, there's no set path to achieve these principles. It's grounded in your strengths as individuals, the strengths of your institutions, and the communities in which you find yourself. There are so many possibilities, and again, that's why we like this picture of the mountain so much, is because again, we're all headed in the same direction, but the way that you might get there is really going to be dependent on where you are and your strengths. So to learn more about the AFU initiatives, we invite you and your colleagues to join us in the upcoming webinar, Starting Point for Looking at Age Friendliness on My Campus. Aggie Can Help. And again, this is going to be on March 1st at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, we just want to say thank you. It's been a pleasure being able to share this information with you, and we look forward to speaking and connecting with you further and answering your questions, which is what we are moving to next. So now we're going to move along to our question and answer session. We offer this reminder that you can type and send questions using the questions feature, which is accessible in the dashboard on the right side of your screen. We are not using the raise hand feature today, so if you have a question, be sure to use the questions panel. We're going to do our best to address as many questions as possible, again, time permitting during this part of the webinar, but know that if you do type in a question and we don't get a chance to answer it on the webinar, that we will be emailing you separate to answer that question. We are also recording the session, and we will send you an access link by email once the recording is available. So you'll be able to download a copy of the presentation slides from today. And again, that website is on your slide at the bottom there. So yes, let's start with questions.
Thank you, Carrie and Andrea. This is Judy Liu from the Gerontological Society of America. Thanks so much for bringing us this fabulous program today. I'm seeing some questions come through, so let me start with the first one here. How do I get support from my own chair and my own dean when they are afraid the process will take time away from my teaching?
Okay, thanks, Judy. That's a great question. That's a tough one, but I guess I would say start small. Are there ways that you might be able to integrate any of the principles into your own teaching? So, start with your own teaching and what you're doing. Does your university offer maybe small grants? I know ours has grants for curriculum or program development. So maybe doing something using that as an opportunity to do something with one of the principals. Also, maybe think about, can this count as service to the university? I mean, I think a lot of the work that I do around AFU, I certainly think that it's important service. Um, you know, we've found with the work that we've been doing, and again, we started small with just our intergenerational WISE program, that creates positive publicity for the university when, those are the kind of stories that our university likes to talk about and share. So that's another way, if you can do something kind of interesting with older adults and get your media department to pay attention to it. I mean, who doesn't like positive press for their university? But I would just say, don't be discouraged. Start slow, start small, and slowly you plant the seeds of AFU in the minds of your chair and your deans, and just know that it takes time to for them to sort of get used to the idea, but eventually they might.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another one. How can you inspire administrators considering resource limitations and lack of interest?
Yeah, I think resource limitations, I think educating people about the opportunities that are there. I think as gerontologists, we are very familiar with this idea of sort of aging is decline, but we've really rephrased and reframed that as much as possible around aging is change. And rather than focusing on sort of the problems, to be thinking about opportunities and solutions. And we think that the age-friendly university initiatives really can be part of an opportunity and a solution in the midst of a lot of these sort of budget-focused conversations. So thinking about increased longevity and aging population, we were just in a meeting with our dean who was talking about an example that he was thinking about of a person who came back to campus who was taking classes and really stayed engaged with the university throughout his life. And then, when he passed, he had such a strong commitment to the university that he made an endowment to the university. And so thinking outside the box of sort of student enrollment and helping think about it as a positive, right? It can also be a way to think about new programs and positive interactions with the community, positive plus publicity for the university as well. But this could be a niche or a way to sort of advertise and bring more students through the door. It can also be a good topic or theme for interdisciplinary collaboration. So thinking about interdisciplinary as sort of the way of the future on campuses, and thinking about aging as one possibility for enhancing that type of cross-discipline collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Great. Here's another one. Is becoming an age-friendly university cost prohibitive?
That's a great question. That's one of the questions that I had when I was standing before the faculty senate. Everybody wanted to know, what is this going to cost? And right now, there currently is no fee for joining the network. Of course, my colleagues in the faculty senate did understand that if this is something that we endorse, then is our administration going to support it? So I think, the answer is No, there's no cost to join. It does, though, ultimately, I think if you want to make it happen, require some time and resources, depending on how far you want to take it on your university. But we were really able to help people not be concerned about that by just talking about, look, this is a framework for helping us to think more broadly. We're already doing a lot of these things. And when I went to the Senate, I knew that our president did support it. So the assumption was, well, if she supports it, maybe later we can ask for money. And we were able to get reassigned time, which is, which we feel lucky. But so I would say no, don't not do it because you're worried it's going to cost money, because I think there's a lot you can do without spending any money.
Mm-hmm. Here's another. Where can I find out more about what other AFU institutions are doing?
So Augie and the AFU committee are working to create opportunities at the upcoming GSA meeting. So this meeting is in November in Austin, Texas. I would encourage you to watch your emails for more information about that. There's also, Augie is launching a AFU interest group. And then also, we mentioned this in our webinar as well, the special issue that's coming out in gerontology and geriatrics education that is entirely focused on AFU efforts from universities across the country. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any funding available for AFU members to engage in research program innovation?
There's nothing specific to AFU yet, so you have to get creative, I guess. But AARP has, in the past few years, offered these age-friendly mini grants as part of their Livable Communities initiative. So if you have an idea ready to go, you can look for that. The Council of Independent Colleges, I was told, had a recent call for campus programs that promoted intergenerational connections with older adults. In Massachusetts and Rhode Island, the Tufts Health Plan Foundation supports age-friendly efforts that can include campus collaborations. Our colleague Joanne Montepere, who's been leading a lot of the AFU initiatives here, mentioned to us that the John T. Gorman Foundation, Kaiser Permanente Community Benefit, and the Patterson Foundation have been identified as age-friendly funders. And, there's a lot of communities that do have funding, maybe small grants, to try to enlist universities to assist with their age-friendly community evaluation efforts. So there's nothing just for AFU, but you can certainly look around. There's probably projects or things that you could do where you could find funding. And of course, there's always federal funding, right, depending on where you are relating to aging-focused research and program development in a range of areas around physical activity, transportation, caregiving. So there's a start.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions here because they're all sort of getting at timeline. So, how long did it take for you to complete the recognition process at CCSU? Just a little bit more about the start to finish.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a great question. I guess, we heard about AFU in 2016, I think, at the Augie meeting. And from that point, it took us 1 year. But I think, as we mentioned in our webinar, prior to that, we had been really trying to get our administration's attention just for supporting our gerontology programs. And we had been doing our intergenerational service learning program. So through that coalition building that we do discuss in our most recent G&GE paper, we had laid kind of a lot of the groundwork. so as soon as I think I heard about it, we heard about it in April. We came back to our campus all jazzed and said, this is a great idea. And I think very soon after, I just started emailing, everyone, the principals and it's something kind of similar to what the handout is for webinar one. We just, I told everybody about it who would listen, and it just kind of went from there. Yeah, so it didn't take too long, amazingly.
And I think that's the same story that we were hearing from our other AFU partners that we had talked to for the webinar, is that, given a good assessment of the strengths and being able to talk to your administrators about the things that are already happening on campus and the work that's already been done, we think that the argument, is pretty strong at that point. I have not heard of anyone having too hard of a time convincing. Again, using the strategy that we talked about, where you've already done the legwork to sort of create the foundation for why this already makes sense, given the things that are already happening on campus.
Yeah. And I think for us, getting people to endorse it wasn't that challenging. I think now we need to say, okay, what does this mean? And our mission is to make sure this really means something moving forward, right?
Yep.
And so that's where we are now. But we found people to be pretty open to it. And I don't know if it's because we were a community engaged institution, we had new faculty or new administrators. Our school dean was excited about gerontology, so that certainly helped us.
Yeah, I think the challenge now is to get people to think broadly and inclusively. I think some of the things that we've heard, again, from our colleagues at other institutions is sometimes the reaction is, oh, well, we have an OLLI, right? Or we have a, continuing education department. Like, that's enough, right? But that's not really what the AFU sort of approach means. It really means a culture change on campus of age inclusion. And so I think that's where more of the work is to be done. And I think that's what webinar 3 is also going to speak to, where Nina Silverstein talks a bit about assessment that she's done, her and her colleagues.
Yeah, so hopefully that answers the question. 1 year, start to finish.
Great. Kind of tying to that, there's a question about checks and balances. Is there something like a committee that makes sure that the universities are following the principles as being a part of AFU?
That's a great question. And again, the AFU movement is so new, and it's really taken off quickly in the last few years, that our understanding that this is that question, there's ongoing discussions about that. So I think all we can say is that there isn't anything right now, but I would expect that in the future there will be something, but I think those discussions are ongoing, right? How do we assure that people aren't just calling themselves age friendly and doing nothing? So I think that's the exciting thing about being part of this movement, is that we get to be in on these discussions, right? And that's very exciting, because it's something that we really care about. And yes, absolutely, we want to make sure that we're calling ourselves age friendly university. I want to make sure that that means something. But yes, we still have to figure out, okay, how many principles do we have to meet, and how do we know if we meet them? And Andrea and I, in the next several months, as we think about assessment and strategic planning, built into that, we're also thinking about how can we make that measurable, so that we can measure our progress as we move forward.
Demonstrate change.
Yeah.
Great. Here's a question. Some of the examples shared today were focused around, sort of, we're very gerontology and OLLI focused. Whereas the AFU vision talks about being more campus-wide. So what can you say about keeping that sort of push in that direction? And I'm tying in another question along the same vein, infusing aging content and integrating it in different majors and courses. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think we wanted to highlight in the webinar, again, starting from your strengths, right? And so obviously, if you're fortunate to have an OLLI on your campus, that is a very significant strength upon which to draw from. And then again, the focus is that that's the starting point. So it's a good first step, and provides, again, part of the justification for having a broader conversation about what the age-inclusive university of the future looks like, again, to match our changing demographics in our country and globally, right? So I think there's lots of different ways that universities are thinking about how to infuse aging content across disciplines. And we talk about LaSalle's example, where there's a little bit of money that's faculty can apply for to create that 1 to 2 week intergenerational module. And that's something at CCSU we've thought a lot about, is how to not necessarily sort of infuse whole aging courses within other disciplines, but to get faculty to feel comfortable creating, 1 to 2 week modules within their courses, and having conversations with faculty about how that would go, and their comfort level with that, and what they would need to feel supported to do things like that. So I think it's an ongoing dialogue and question, and I think it comes back to the relationships and the time to really get to know what's happening on your campus, and going back to, who are those people on campus that are going to pick this up and really champion this forward, because you need that. Even the two of us, as excited and passionate as we are with our small committee, we're going to need help to really make this a campus-wide change.
And I think I'll just add to that. I mean, I think that's where the importance of having an AFU committee comes in. So yes, we have our gerontology committee that focuses on our gerontology programs, but we see AFU as separate from that. And so we're really working to develop a committee of people across the university to work with us, so that isn't just coming out of people who are already interested in aging. And we started as a teaching university. We have a lot of great programs for kids, and do a lot of great things for kids in our community. So I've just been, as we talk to our colleagues, we say things like, oh, that's a really neat program. Well, how could we maybe include older adults in that, and they're like, oh, that's a neat idea. Or we have a colleague who's been running a literacy center for, years and years, and we're undergoing a renovation, and after conversations with him, he's now wants to say, okay, we're having a literacy center now from birth to 100. So it's just, I think you just keep having these conversations and learn about what other people are doing, and say, gee, wouldn't it be interesting to have some older volunteers do that? Or people just haven't even thought about it. So, but it is a great question. I think it's a constant effort to, go to things. I think one of the best things about becoming an AFU has been, for me, is just getting to know so many other people, because now, the library's doing something called the Human Library, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to go check that out. Do they have any older people involved in that? Or we're reaching out more and learning more about what our colleagues are doing. Yes, we have an agenda, but we think it's a good agenda. So and so far people have just been so receptive and open.
Mm-hmm.
But it does take, everybody's busy. I don't know, I'm sure other people have the same experience. There's so many wonderful things going on our campus. Nobody has time to go to any of them. So we're trying to think about, okay, these people are doing this cool thing. Can we partner? Can we integrate aging next year when they do this workshop or seminar? So, you know, it's a slow process, but if you love it and you're passionate about it, you just keep plugging along. And I think eventually people get the idea.
Yeah, and you know, another example, again, the AFU initiatives sort of give us a broader reach, right? To have these conversations with people. You know, there's a business pitch effort that's happening with one of our colleagues, and he wanted to know how we might be able to, you know, infuse aging or include aging. And you know, Carrie and I don't have business backgrounds, you know, so we're a little bit grasping at straws, but you know, one of the things that could be simple that would, again, sort of get aging in the door and raise awareness might be something like whatever, you know, business pitch they make, there's an AFU award that goes with it, right? So age-friendly award. So whose ever business pitch takes the most age-inclusive sort of strategy or research or approach, maybe that's something we can give, right? The CCSU Gerontology AFU Award, right? Again, something small, but it's something that gets at more of that culture change, inclusive, broader than the gerontology program lens.
Great, thank you so much. I think we only have time for one more question, so our last question, and I'll cover several actually with this one, several questions around just copies of the slides and copy of the recording. You'll find on the slide right now the geron.org/webinar URL, where all the materials, including the handouts again, which were available to you throughout the hour in the GoToWebinar panel, a copy of all the materials and recording will be posted on this web page starting tomorrow. But you'll also get an email notice when everything's online. So with that, I will advance to the last slide here and ask that everyone take a look, because at the end of the program, a webinar survey will automatically launch. And so in an effort for continual improvement, we'd like to hear your thoughts. So please provide feedback by clicking the survey link at the end of the webinar. And again, thank you so much, Carrie and Andrea, for bringing us this super program. You've done some amazing work on your campus, and you've shared some other fantastic examples of other AFU programs. So thank you again for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us.